get over into Psalm 68 here in just a little bit. But what he was talking about was when Jesus, after the resurrection, and he's on the road to Emmaus, and those two men were walking and talking, and the Bible said Jesus joined himself to them, and they said, "Are you a stranger here, and you don't know what's been going on?" If you remember that story.
Mm-hmm. I didn't recognize it.
You don't recognize it. All right, let's see if we can find it. Okay, it looks like Luke 24. And it starts off at verse 15. It says, and it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus drew himself near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he gets into this, and it is so powerful. And he said unto them, what manner of communications are these that you're having one to another as you walk and you're sad? Verse 18 said, and one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered and said, are you a stranger in Jerusalem, and have not known the things which are come to pass in these days? And Jesus said, what things? They said, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests, and that's the story, but what I wanted to get to was this. He begins to talk to them, and they don't know who he is.
Right.
And, you know, I've shared along this line, when Mary came on resurrection morning, and in the book of John, the Bible said she told the disciples she was going to go anoint his body for burial, because they had, when they killed him, they didn't have time to properly anoint his body for burial, and they took his body down and stuck him in the tomb. And when she gets to the cemetery, it's just one man standing outside the tomb. And it's, of course, it's Jesus, but she don't know that. The Bible reads in the book of John, says she supposing him to be the gardener. And she says, sir, if you'll just tell me where you've laid his body so that I can go anoint him for burial, I won't bother you. And Jesus just says one word. He says, Mary. And as soon as he speaks, her eyes are open and she knows who he is. Mm-hmm. And the thing that was so amazing about that passage of Scripture is that there's nobody there but him and her. And he had delivered her from 7 devils. He had delivered her from a life of prostitution. He had done all these marvelous things, and she was a very devout, faithful follower of Jesus. And for 3 years, she just followed him everywhere. And I believe her sister was Martha, and Lazarus, and we all know that relationship. And so the question that I would have is, if I'm sitting here looking at this one man face to face alone in the cemetery, how could you not know who he was?
Yeah. Right.
But it goes something like this to me. She was expecting to see Mary's boy, but that's not who got out of the tomb. It was the Son of God.
Right.
And she did not know who he was. But my sheep know my voice, so when he spoke, she knew him. Okay. Now, back here at Luke 24, or what I said was 18. Got it right here somewhere.
24.
24, yeah, okay. If you calculate it from where they were to Jerusalem to Emmaus, was 7.5 miles. And so Jesus joins himself to these two guys as they're walking this journey, talking. And they are so sad and so disappointed, and you can read the rest of this in Luke 24, of how that they just knew that he was the Messiah, and that shows you their expectations. They thought the Messiah is come to deliver them from the Romans. That's what everybody thought.
Right.
When the Messiah comes, he'll deliver us from all our enemies and all our headaches and stuff like that. They totally misunderstood the whole purpose of Jesus coming and dying and resurrecting. And the thing I wanted to show you is verse 25, I think. he tells them, and this is King James, then he said unto them, O fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And look at verse 27. And beginning at Moses, Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. So Jesus has taken him all the way to Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Jesus takes them from the very beginning, and he expounded unto them in all things, the scriptures, the things concerning himself. So he's preaching to them for 7.5 miles while they walk. And they didn't get it. They still didn't get it.
So they didn't know his voice?
That's the thing that was so interesting.
Huh.
The preaching, they didn't recognize the preaching. There's a difference when he calls your name and preaching.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay? And because when I first began to ponder this, that question hit my mind too.
Why didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, because he's preaching to them, how could they? And that's one of the things that Mark Hamby was talking about. He said, surely you would recognize the inflection of his voice and his mannerisms and the way he talked and carried on. But see, the thing that people don't understand, Mary's boy died and went in the tomb, but that's not who got up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the whole thing. Anyway, what I want to give you is this. Okay, now go on down, look at verse 30. And it came to pass, okay, because it's evening time, they've come into this little place, it's, for lack of a better word, we'll call it a hotel, motel, whatever. And they're going to go in and spend the night, and they constrained him. They asked him to abide with us, verse 29, because it's evening, and so he went in like he's going to stay with them, but he's just talking with them.
Yeah.
And it came to pass, verse 30, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, he blessed it, brake it, and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened. Now, this is the thing that Mark Hamby was bringing out so beautiful, and you know, it's funny. I preached a little bit about, because he's gonna. Remember when I talked? Was it last Tuesday? I can't remember when it was now. I talked about the little boy and the loaves and the fishes. Took it. Okay. Mark Hamby was bringing this out here. He said in verse 30, and I thought this was so good. He said, let's look at that for a minute, because this is not the first time he did this. There is something he's trying to convey in the way God works with us. People change, names change, times change, geography changes, but God's principles always remain the same. And when we understand his principles, we understand his ways. And you remember that scripture in Psalms, the children of Israel, God showed them his acts, but Moses, he showed his ways. And see, that's the difference. Everybody wants the acts. They want the water into wine. They want the fish and loaves into feed the 5,000, and on and on and on. We want the healings. We want the deliverance. We want all this acts.
Right.
But nobody wants to know his ways, because that means we got to change.
Right.
All right. Now, in order to change, the thing that's so interesting here is this. In order for this change, look at the process. He took it, blessed it, broke it, and gave it. And if you go back to where the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, same thing. And then when you get over into, and of course I haven't heard the rest of this thing. That's the only part I heard, because it refreshed my memory. But my mind began to go back to the scriptures. All of the heroes of faith, for lack of a better word, we'll call them that, through the Bible, followed that same principle. He took them, he blessed them, he broke them, and he gave them. Remember what happened to Moses? The Bible said that his mother put him in the little basket, put him in the river. What happened? The Pharaoh's daughter took him.
Yeah.
He was blessed in the house of Pharaoh, to bless and to learn and to gain all that he was gained there. Then God broke him on the backside of the desert. Then he gave him to deliver Israel.
Yeah.
And you look at Joseph, another great example. God took him from among his brothers, blessed him with the coat of many colors and the Father's favor and all that stuff, broke him in the prison house. Then he gave him to the nations of that day to deliver them from the famine.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can just go on and on and on and on throughout the scriptures. And that process, we are not exempt from.
Right.
And so over here in Psalm 68:6 is what I wanted to share with you tonight for a little bit. Because this to me is kind of making plain some of our lives, the roads we walk down, the way we've had to come and walk, and with our families and friends and everything about our lives. Psalm 68 verse 6 says, God setteth the solitary in families. He brings out those which are bound with chains, but the rebellious dwell in a dry land. And the first part of that thing there, God setteth the solitary in families. There's a couple of words there that need to be looked at. First of all, the word solitary there, that's where we get our English word for a solitaire diamond. It's the highest priced diamond, it's the most exquisite, and so forth and so on. I mean, in the value of the economy of the world. And this is what God has done, is he picks one out of every family. And he says, you're my diamond, you're my solitaire, you're the one. Now, that in and of itself sounds kind of nice.
Yeah.
That God would choose you and say, oh, I must be special because look what God's done to me. But the thing that I had to double check on was this. That second word in that verse, God setteth. That word setteth there, literally in the ancient Hebrew, it means to take you from, here it is again, took. Take you from a place of comfort, your home, and put you in a place where you become the prisoner.
Wow.
That's what that word means in the ancient Hebrew. And when you start looking at what God has done through all of us and our lives and the way we've had to walk and the heartaches and the headaches and the frustrations, and we could go on and on and on through some of the abuse and the aggravation we've had to deal with our whole lives, you can look back and see the principles of God, where he said, I took you out of your comfort zone. I took you from where you were comfortable, happy, at peace, at ease, and I removed you from that. And then I blessed you. And we get kind of messed up in that second step there, because we think, okay, we found the favor of God, he's blessed us. And we don't realize that that's just strength for the journey. Because the next step is the breaking.
Mm-hmm.
And, Joseph, like the great point with Joseph, he was blessed with the Father's favor and the coat of many colors and on and on and on. And yet, the breaking took 22 years out of his young life. Moses, 40 years.
Sabrina, 40 years. That's what it feels like.
I mean, this is what, I'm looking at me, 50 years.
Yeah.
But when we start looking at what God is doing through all of us, because he, first of all, every time you hear a word from the Lord, I don't care if it's in a dream, a scripture, or a song, I don't care. Wherever you get a word from the Lord, the first thing we do with that is we try to interpret it, and out of that interpretation comes expectations.
Right.
And let's face it, our expectations never match up with God's.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at those men, as well as the disciples and everybody else on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus started his ministry, he turned the water into wine there at the wedding. That was his first recorded miracle. He starts opening blinded eyes and healing the crippled. He does all these wonderful things. all of a sudden he's the number one guy in the whole area. Everybody's got to be with Jesus. You know, as a matter of fact, remember the story of the woman with the issue of blood. People were so packed around him, she had to get down and crawl to touch the hem of his garment to be healed. And with everybody touching him, just to be seen with him, kind of reminds me of people wanting to, you know, these pictures everybody wants to be taken with politicians and celebrities and stuff, you know.
Right.
And what I see when I look at that is, you know, our expectations is, okay, the Lord, you know, He's there to be our spiritual so-called Santa Claus. He's going to give us what we want, give us what we ask for. Everything's going to be great. And, you know, we've got all of our favorite scriptures in here that shows he's going to fight all our enemies, which we think is people we don't like. And,
Right.
you know, and you look at all these things and we realize when God, He takes us out of our comfort zone and He blesses us, the first thing we're thinking, oh, okay, I'm willing to pay this price because, yeah, I paid a big price leaving my comfort zone. You know, selling all my stuff. That's a big price, and it is. It's huge.
Right.
And then He starts to bless, and we think, okay, well, I can live with the trade-off.
Right.
And because that's our expectations. But then He puts us on the backside of the desert, or He puts us in the prison house, or He breaks our heart, or He does like these two men on the road to Emmaus. We thought for sure, it says there, we thought for sure He was the one to deliver Israel. Because we watched Him heal the sick, we watched Him raise the dead, we watched Him do all this great, cool stuff. It had been a piece of cake for Him to get rid of the Romans.
Right.
But that's not what He was sent for.
Yeah.
And that's not what He has put us in our position for. It is not that we might have our expectations there, because His is greater.
Right.
And He's changing us to start looking at things through His eyes instead of our own. And see, that's a hard thing to do, because, you know, you look at all the stories in the scripture there. We talked about Moses and Joseph, and good Lord, you can talk about David and all of them through the scriptures there. And they all went through the same process. And it wasn't until after the breaking, it's in the giving where the multiplication comes in. It's in the giving where you realize your purpose. And through the whole process, you got to say, gee, this is not fair.
Right.
It's just not fair. You know, I mean, I look at, I tell Paula this now and then, I look at my brothers and, you know, and I look back at them and think, it's not fair. But yet, then I'm reminded there, I think it's in the book of Jeremiah, what right hath the clay to say the potter?
Right.
You know. But this is where we are now. We're in this process where he has taken us. He took us out of our comfort zone. And that's just that one step is a hard thing.
Yeah.
You know. I know all you guys have experienced the loss and the frustration of where you put your whole life into something and now you're sitting there with nothing.
Right.
You know? I mean, and there's no promise at this point
Right.
of anything greater. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to take you out of this, but if you'll just hang on, God don't do that.
Right.
You know? When Joseph comes out of that house wearing that coat of many colors, signifying for all to see the favor of the Father, and his brothers strip him down, throw him in the pit, and the Midianites come and rescue him and sell him as a slave. He's not, as a matter of fact, if you read the story of Joseph, he had the dreams. Okay? He comes out all excited. Guys, I got a dream from the Lord. I mean, how many of us do that? How many of us, we get a dream from the Lord and we can't wait to share it?
Right.
And most everybody going, that's pretty cool, you know? And we're excited about it. Well, his brothers didn't. Of course, he was 17. His brothers were in their early 40s. And he did not. As a matter of fact, the scripture puts it this way. Joseph goes through all that he goes through. And he is now 30 years old. It's 20 some odd years later when he gets out of prison. And he's now the Pharaoh's right-hand man. Fast forward 9 years, 7 years of plenty, 2 years into the famine. He's now 39 years old. And he's doing whatever he's doing in their Egyptian kingdom there. And he sees these guys kneeling down, because that's you did that to the monarchs.
Right.
He kneeled down. They were kneeling down because they come to beg for grain or wheat or whatever it was, something to eat. And as he looks at them kneeling, the Bible says, then Joseph remembered the dream.
Yeah.
For 20 some odd years, he could not see the promise.
Yeah.
Wow.
He could not see the promise. And look, just go back a few years on each of us. Just go back a few years on each of us.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time you could look back and say, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. I had no clue. I mean, here we are sitting here in this living room, and still we don't know.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain peace and there's a certain joy in our spirit because we know God's up to something that's going to be good. But right now, we're still kind of shaking the dust off of the battle we just come from.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because of that, I look at that and I say, he takes you out of your comfort zone. And then he blesses you, and we think that's the trade-off. And we don't realize, it reminds me of when Elijah was running from Jezebel, and he's fleeing for his life. I mean, even though he just called fire down from heaven and exposed the false prophets, he's sitting there and he's running for his life. He gets weary, he gets tired, he lays down, and when he goes to sleep, suddenly somebody slaps him on the side and says, "Wake up!" And it's an angel of the Lord. He's got a nice meal prepared for him. He does that twice, and that signifies the first day, second day. After that, the Bible said he went 40 days in the strength of that meat. Mm-hmm. God blessed him so he could make the journey.
Yeah.
Because God knows we can't do it in our own strength. Mm-hmm. That's why he takes us, he blesses us, not so we can have the doodads on our arms and Shandai each other and all that stuff, but he blesses you for the strength you need for the journey. Mm-hmm. And that's because that's where the breaking is.
Right.
It goes like this. The little boy had 5 loaves and 2 fishes. If he had not broken it, it wouldn't have fed any but 5 people or whatever. It's in the breaking you feed the multitudes. Mm. And this is what we're, the whole creation groaneth, not just them, but we also, waiting for this manifestation, waiting for these ones that have been broken, waiting for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is what God's doing with us. He takes us, and it's like that, God setteth the solitary in the families. He takes you out of your comfort zone, your home. The literal word there in the ancient Hebrew takes you out of your home, which is your comfort zone, and puts you in a foreign land as a stranger and a prisoner. Mm-hmm. And that's the solitaire. That's the one that God has chosen. And here's one other thing about the solitaire. Now, I gave you the English version of that, where we get our solitaire diamond. But the actual word solitaire in the book of Psalm 68, that actual word translates to a door. You become the door so others can come in, whether it be family, friends, or whoever God puts in your world. You become the door. See, that is so powerful to me, because you can't. This whole thing, this whole kingdom thing, is not about building big churches,
right,
or big followings. It's about creation being healed and restored,
yes,
reconciled. That's what it's really about. And when you become the door, most ministries, if you become that door, that place of influence, it's to build your church. and have a congregation or a ministry or whatever everybody's trying to do. And what God wants is a door to bring creation to Him,
Yeah.
so they can be healed and restored. We become that. God pulls us out of our comfort zone, not so we can be Kenneth Copeland and all those guys. I see as we become the door, He takes you out of your comfort zone and He puts you in a foreign place to become the door. Because this is not about us saving or healing or delivering or reconciling your favoritist people. In the story of Joseph, if you remember that, he's been in prison. He goes to Potiphar's house. Then he gets thrown into prison. He's in there, and this is he gets out. He's now second in command over the entire nations. And he first has to feed, take care of, look out for the welfare of the ones that had him locked up for his entire adult life. Think of that. Because he has no hope. In his mind, he's forgot the dreams.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In his mind, he don't think he'll ever see his family again.
Yeah.
His blood family. He don't,
Sure.
he's it's out of his mind. It's not something, well, let me go see if I can hire a detective and go find them. In his mind, it's a done deal. And so what does he do? He heals, he feeds, he takes care of the very ones that locked him up.
Yeah.
Now that's reconciliation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's reconciliation. It reminds me of the story of Elisha. Remember, Elisha and his servant, they're minding their own business, and the enemy kings, and there's 2 or 3 nations they've gathered against the children of Israel, and they're getting ready to go sneak up and do this attack, and all of a sudden the Lord speaks to Elisha and said, you go tell the king of Israel, the Ammonites are about to come in on this place over here. Sends his army over there and defeats them. They circle around, come in, they do this several times. Finally, the enemy king said, we got a spy in the camp. Somebody's telling Israel our plans. Nobody can do this, so we got a spy in the camp. Finally, somebody speaks up and said, no, sir, there's no spy in the camp. There's a prophet in the land, and God's speaking to him. They said, well, we can't get the army of Israel. Surely we can defeat one old guy. And so they go and they surround the house of Elisha. You can just kind of imagine that. Here he is in his little hut out there in the middle of a field somewhere. And all of a sudden there's a few thousand army guys
Right.
totally surrounded with horses and shields and spears and God knows what else. And the Bible says the servant, and some say his name was Gehazi, I don't know what his name was, but he goes out for whatever purpose that morning. And as soon as he steps outside, he looks up and the hills are surrounded by the enemy. He runs back and he tells Elisha, we're going to die. We're going to die. I mean, we're totally surrounded by the enemy. And here's the thing that amazed me about this whole story. The Bible said Elisha goes out there and sees what he sees, what the servant. See, this is the difference in the servant realm and the son realm. Mm-hmm. The servant sees the enemy. Well, so does the son realm. But what does Elisha do? The Bible said he lays hands on his servant and prays for him.
Yeah.
He don't pray, okay, let's join hands and let's believe God to deliver us.
Right.
He lays hands on him, and what does he pray? Father, open his eyes. Well, wait a minute. His eyes were open. He could see the enemy. But the Bible said when he opened his eyes and looked, the heavens were filled with the host of the armies of the Lord. And he said, they that be with us are more than they that be with them.
Yeah.
And here they come. They come thundering over the mountain there, and they come right up in the front yard. And just as they get there, Elisha prays, and God strikes the whole army blind. He takes them by the hand. I see them now. Can you imagine that train going through town? They have to put one hand on the shoulder because they don't know where they're going or what they're doing. Elisha takes the lead guy by the hand and leads him straight up to the throne of Israel. The king jumps up and said, oh my God, what are we going to do? What do you want me to do? Let's all kill them. They're blind. We can kill them. Elisha says, no. Feed them and send them home. Wow. Reconciliation. Mm-hmm. The ones hours earlier wanting to cut your head off, now you're feeding them and taking care of them. Because they cannot do you any harm. Mm-hmm. And this is the same with Joseph. He has been feeding the very ones that had him locked up, taking care of them, with no hope, no promise. of anything. I mean, I'm going to take care of my enemy because I know God's going to do something for me better. No, my job is to feed the enemy. And he takes care of them. 2 years into the famine, his brother shows up. Then he remembered the dream. And matter of fact, he sends back word to his father, Jacob, and said the famine is sore still upon us, and there's 5 more years. And he puts them over in the land of Goshen, which was the most beautiful, lush place in all of Egypt. And Pharaoh said, so be it. You're in charge. Do what you want. And that's how they ended up in Goshen. And that's how they ended up closing out the book of Genesis. They had the most fertile land in all the kingdom.
Yeah.
And this is what we do. We've been taken. We don't doubt that for 1 second. It don't have to be a genius to figure that out. We've been taken from our place of comfort.
Yeah.
And he blessed us. And now the breaking. And the breaking, I don't know, 20-something odd years for Joseph, 40 years for Moses. I don't know. For 3 Hebrew children, it was just a matter of days. Daniel was 21 days. We can go on and on through the scriptures. But the point of it is, you're broken according to the plan of God. And the breaking is different for everybody.
Right.
We all have our own, bar that we try to measure up to as far as something, and God knows how to destroy that or change it. And it's in the breaking. It's in the breaking where the multiplication takes place, and then he gives you. And see that, and in every situation, every time, what God does in the giving, when you come to that part of the process of the giving, is where you see entire nations changed, not just a handful here and there.
Right.
Nations are changed.
Yeah.
Look at Joseph. When God gave him to Egypt, he saved that entire nation from starvation, them and Israel. Look what happened when he gave Moses. They 400 some odd years of being slaves, God delivered them out. Look what, and the greatest of all, look what happened when God gave Jesus.
Right.
He came out, he said, for this cause I've come, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. What happened? I was reading something the other day, and it said, we've got these ministries and these different, not just ministries per se, but politicians and great men and women of renown. They work 40, 50, 60 years on their life or their legacy or whatever it is, and most of them are forgotten. Unless you can Google them, they're forgotten.
Yeah.
But here's Jesus for 3 years. 3 years. That's all he did. He never wrote a book, never did any of the thing that everybody else says you have to do.
Right.
And yet, he literally changed the entire world forever. It's in the giving. It's in the giving.
Yeah.
That's where the purpose of everything is revealed. I was thinking about the 3 Hebrew children. God took them from their land, their homeland. They were captives.
Right.
Along with Daniel, they were captives there in Babylon, and so they were taken. They were taken out. God blessed them because the king of Babylon loved them. Him and Daniel. Remember the story that they wanted to eat the king's meat because they wanted to use them for to be the wise men and all the different things. They were kind of moving them up in the ranks to be the right hand of the king, and so they wanted to feed them and take care of them. King was proud of them. And then remember Daniel, he refused to eat the king's meat, and he ate only what the Lord told him to fix. That's where we get our, the Daniel fast or something?
Right.
Whatever that is, anyway.
Daniel diet.
Yeah. And so what took place there was he made them, if you read the book of Daniel, he made the 3 Hebrew children and Daniel, made them our equivalent of governors over various provinces there in Babylon. They all reported to the king, but they were right under the king. And they were very, very well known, very well loved. God blessed them. And then the next thing you know, the fiery furnace comes along. That's the breaking. That's the breaking for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened when they came out? Remember, no smell of smoke, nothing was singed on them, and so forth, so on. They were given to the entire nation there. In what way? Remember what the king said? He said, because the old law, before they went into the fiery furnace, there was a new law in the land that said, if you don't bow to the golden idol, we're going to burn you up.
Right.
When they come out of the fiery furnace, the king goes, new law. If you serve any other god than their God, we're going to burn you, bury your house. So you see that in the breaking and the giving is where the purpose is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make any sense?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and the whole thread that runs through all of this is none of it is easy on the flesh. That's the whole common denominator of everything.
Yes.
Nothing is easy on the flesh.
For sure.
Because God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth.
Mm-hmm. It's really amazing that that's what you brought out today. Because I was talking about how the Lord was showing me, you know how people say, is all hearts and minds clear at the end of a service?
Oh, yeah.
And I was trying to go to sleep, and the Lord was like, that's not when they should ask that question. It should be at the beginning of the service. Come in with your heart and mind clear. Don't come in like the Clampets with all the junk on you. Mm-hmm. And because I know your needs. I know what you need healed and what you need prayed for and touched and orchestrated and corrected in your life. I already know all that. Come in and just seek me. Mm-hmm. And be empty. Be an empty vessel, a clean slate for me to write on. And so I was telling her that, and how that what he said to me is that when you're done with the service, every cell in your body should be alive, your belly should be full, your heart should be full, your heart should be on fire. He worded it, I'll have to write it all down because it was all beautiful. Your heart should be on fire, your belly should be full. He just named like every organ and what all, your feet should be ready to march, your hands should be full of heat. He was naming everything. And I was like,
good.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That
is what has been, the Lord showed me that a long time ago, that people are coming in. You can see them walking in the door. And I told Emmy, I said, they look like the Clampets with all their junk piled on them. and so they sit there, and to get that fixed, to get all that stuff fixed, they come in with a prayer that they need answered. Yep. They come in with a need. They come in with this smaller, trivial stuff that God's already working on, and it's being processed in your life. Mm-hmm. Instead, come in expecting much, much more than that. Mm-hmm. You have now limited yourself because you came in with these small needs that fit on your back. Instead, come in expecting, like he said, endless things that will happen at the end of the when it's revealed. And then also, too, a point that you brought up of the reconciliation part. I had told you I wanted to study that out because people are getting confused about. We limit reconciliation and love and forgiveness and mercy and all that to our human nature and our limited emotional realm. And it's not that at all. It's not about just being nice to somebody and forgiving them for what they did bad to you or whatever, and going and making nice and, trying to appease them or whatever. You don't move into that unless God shows you. Like, none of these men that you just named in the Bible did anything till the processing was done.
Right.
So God, it was all in His timing according to His will and plan, not ours. Mm-hmm. He didn't go make nice with his brothers, Joseph didn't, out of the order of God. God sent his brothers to him, and then it all was worked out. Each one God was working through it. We dare not lay our hands to that. Mm-hmm. And I won't name it because we're videoing, but the situation Russ and I are in, we don't dare put our hands to that. God orchestrated that, and when He wants to work that out, He will or He won't, And He told us And I told Gary this, called Gary about it because I didn't understand what it meant. But he told us when we left some meeting, maybe it was Darren's, he said, I'm making you bread on the water for the people, or something like, or I'm casting you as bread upon the water for the people. And I still get a chill when I say that, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I mean, I've heard it, a lot through the years and thought I knew what it meant, but then when it applies to your life, you're like, wait a minute, what does that really mean? So I called Gary and he was like, yep, I can totally see that.
We were talking about, I forget now exactly the way you just put it, about you don't do anything, you got to let God do it. Like Joseph didn't go to his brothers.
Right.
Okay. To show you what happens, first of all, we are not capable of messing up God's plan.
Right.
We're not that smart.
Right.
Or holy or nothing for that matter.
Exactly.
And the thing that is so interesting is this: what happens when you try? Look at what happened to Moses. See, all his life, for 40 years, his mama was his babysitter, his nanny, taking care of him, educating him, training him, so forth, so on. And you know yourself, mamas speak good things into their kids.
Right.
You're smart. God saved you for some purpose. All the kids your age are dead.
Yeah.
And on and on and on and on. So what does Moses do when he's 40 years old? He tries to do his ministry and leaves the body in the sand.
Right. Right.
But like I said, we're not capable of messing up God's plan. God's plan is to take Moses, bless him, and then break him. He thought he was going to take his blessing and do his ministry. What happened? God used that to break him by sending him to the backside of the desert.
Right.
See,
Yeah.
so nothing's going to be lost.
Right. Right.
You could just cause yourself a lot less heartache.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the lesson I'm trying to learn. Russ and I are trying to learn right now, and I'm sure we all are. But also, too, well, number one, don't get out of the will of God and be in His timing and wait on Him to show you how to do anything. But especially when it comes to reconciling and our earthly love, we talk about God's love is the agape love, and is not our limited, earthbound, emotional love that we have. So when you love somebody, you want the best for them, just like God does.
Yeah.
Now, we have a tendency, we were talking about this with Cody the other day, we have a tendency to pave the way for them. Here, I'm going to buy you a new car, and I'm going to help you get this job, and we're going to pay for your college, and here's all your apartment and all your furniture, and here's this and that. And so you make it easy on them. But in the end, what have you really done? You've taken away their ability to strive and work for something and earn it themselves and appreciate it more and grow stronger while striving against those obstacles they might run across and the hardship they might run across, the lessons they would learn. You've taken away that opportunity for them, really.
Absolutely.
And so then that's what we see, with a lot of young people nowadays, is they've had everything. So each generation is given more to the next, to where now everything's so easy. They're terrified when anything goes wrong. And so we have to think about God and the process for us. What He does is He loves us to, more than we could ever love anybody on the planet, but He's going to put us through these processes because He knows our end, and He knows what great plan He has for us, which is far greater than anything we could imagine, because we limit Him too much.
Absolutely.
And it might be through a fiery trial or whatever to process us and get us there, but that doesn't mean that we're not loved. It doesn't mean that He doesn't have our best in mind for us. So we have to keep that in mind when dealing with each other, too.
Absolutely.
You were talking about that, and I had to look it up to find out the wording of it. Somebody posted on Facebook, I don't know who it was, but it says, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times.
Yeah.
And this is
Very
that circle.
true.
This is
Yeah.
what
Yes.
we're facing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. It doesn't mean you have to go condone, like we were talking earlier about, again, we're on videoing, so I won't name his name, but that minister that slapped his wife in the face on a regular basis, we wouldn't tolerate that. Now, would we go and approve of that or apologize because we left the church because we didn't appreciate what he was doing? Would we go and make nice with that? Would that be condoning what his behavior is? Would it make him then think, oh, okay, well, I was right all along, and they're coming to apologize to me, So that's where God has to work, is in those kinds of situations, because you can love somebody but still not condone what they're doing. You can pray for somebody but still not support their bad things. God has to work that out, and then we can't fix that in them.
Because if we put our hands on it, we're going to mess it up.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
And that's where I think all this is so important to be taught to people, the difference in, like, where, churches are like, let's go do works. Let's go open a soup kitchen, and let's go out here and put shoes on all the homeless or whatever. And those are all wonderful and worthy causes. But for us in reconciliation, how does that apply? We don't just go out here and condone everything that's going on. We don't just go give our everything we've got to somebody just to make them like us or approve of us, or, again, it's such a careful area we have to tread. Our lives are not our own anymore, and we can't do anything lest he shows us or we hear it.
People literally would drive for miles to be healed. And God did that with so many of them. I mean, actual miracle healings. But how many were actually changed?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm out carousing, acting a fool and everything, and my body starts decaying because of my crazy lifestyle, so I'm going to go get healed. Oh, great! Now I'm healed, so let's go do it again.
Go do it again.
Learn to have something else.
Right.
Yeah, and see, you get into that thing. There's no change in their nature and their character to be like God, and all it's done is fixed them on a temporary basis, so to speak. It's kind of like this, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. But guess what? Lazarus died again.
Right.
And I mean, that was a great testimony for a while, but after a while, where's the testimony? See, it's in the changing of our nature, our very DNA, so that we can honestly say, like Jesus, I only do what I see my Father do. Only say what he says. That's the nature, and that's in the reconciling, the healing, and you read all that stuff going on when they were crucifying Jesus. He didn't retaliate at all. He didn't retaliate he said, Father, forgive them.
Right.
I can honestly say I'm so far from that. I'd be wanting to rain fire down on them.
I don't know. You've been in a situation, a few of them actually, and you have not raised a hand or a voice or a curse or anything against many, many people. Well, we were talking about that too with Emmy, about how our desire is not to draw people to us, to draw people unto him. And so the past ministries have been where they would draw people to them.
Yeah.
And even if they didn't want to, people just automatically, I told her, I said, she used to a long time ago pray for, what was it you'd say?
Signs and wonders.
Well, clear and definite signs is what you always said to us. And I said, that's not what you should pray or look for. Because God doesn't, sometimes, sure, he'll be the fiery burning bush or whatever, but he's not always going to appear to you in a sign and a wonder. And the works that used to happen, like those miracles and the healings, that drew people in. But what did they do? They were drawn to the person, thinking he was a physical manifestation of God in the earth, he or her. And they were just, if I can just, get near them and hang around them and be part of their entourage or whatever, that'll filter off onto me and rub off on me. And that's not how it works at all. And I told Emmy, I said, in this new day that we're going into, I said, and I guess I'm going to pick up where Gary's been going for 50 years, being the voice in the wilderness saying, it's coming, I said, I feel something huge coming, and it'll be a glory beyond anything that we've ever seen here in the earth before. And it will be far beyond those signs and wonders that we experienced in the past. In the days ahead, it'll be far beyond that. But, from what I have seen in the spirit and what I believe to be true, we'll just appear and do it. We'll go but we won't be for name or reputation or a following or anything like that.
Like Philip in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
The Bible said Philip, they call him Philip the evangelist. He was in what we would term a red hot revival in this city. And the Lord spoke to him and said, leave this revival and go out to the desert. He goes into the desert where the Ethiopian man's sitting in a chariot. He ministers to him, gives him the word of the Lord and all kinds of great stuff, and said immediately, he disappeared.
Back. Yeah.
God translated him out of there somewhere
Well,
else.
and the same, is it Joel's army where they'll go through the walls and, over and under and through and whatever, and nothing will stop them. And that's what I feel like. No political system, no religious system, no physical system will stop us.
Right.
I don't know if it'll be me, but it'll be God's people.
God knows what each of us can handle.
Exactly.
And, what might be a big deal to me may be a piece of cake for you.
Right.
And vice versa.
Pastor Stanley Mitchell at Christ Church said one time, it's all relative. He said, you may have a boy that lives in Brentwood or Franklin, which anybody listening, it's an affluent community where kids have pretty much everything they want in those communities. And so they go to play on a baseball team, and everybody's got the hottest, latest, greatest glove, to catch and ball and bat and whatever. And another kid's got secondhand. You got it at the thrift store or something. In his heart, he's longing for and wanting and feeling kind of out of place and like less than because he doesn't have all the great stuff they have. But now you take that same kid with the secondhand stuff and put him in the inner city, Detroit or New York or something, and he would have more than those kids have. So it's all relative to where you're at.